Welcome to today's USD Alumni event, Diversity in Politics, featuring Dr. Mike Williams, Director of the Changemaker Hub and Professor of Political Science and International Relations. My name is Megan O'Rourke, and I'm the Associate Director of Regional Programs for the Office of Alumni Relations at USD. I'm also a proud member of the class of 2015. I have the pleasure of working with our 23 domestic Torero clubs across the country, including the Washington, D.C. Torero Club, who is co-hosting today's program with the College of Arts and Sciences. Although we are physically apart, our amazing club committees are hard at work, putting together and supporting virtual programming for our alumni to keep them engaged with and connected to the university while we await the day to meet once again in person. Special shout out to DC Torero Club members who are on this call and some other individuals from DC who have been featured in virtual programming this year. While today's event is set in Washington, D.C., its virtual setting allows for Toreros from all over the country to join us for this important and informative conversation. Thank you to those who have joined us live and who will be watching at a later time. Speaking of watching at a later time, this event will be recorded and available on the USD Alumni Association's YouTube channel later this week. I would like to officially introduce Noel, Dean Noel Norton, and then we can get started with the program. So Dean Norton is the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, as you know. She has served as the Dean of the College since 2013. She joined the faculty at USD in 1994 and previously served as Associate Dean, co-director of USD's Living Learning Communities, always a tongue twister for me, and a director of the honors program while maintaining her faculty role in the Department of Political Science and International Relations. There are a slew of wonderful things that Dean Norton has accomplished during her time at USD, and she will note some of those great things that the college is up to at the end of the program. The promoting of humanities as the central element of a liberal arts education, as well as her longstanding career at USD as a faculty member and administrator, makes her one of USD's most cherished deans by our students, staff, and alumni. So Dean Norton, please go ahead and take it away.
I have two introductions for the speaker today. One is a professional and the other one is more personal. So you all know, most of you in the room, in fact, I think all of you are here because you know Dr. Williams, JD, PhD. He is, as you know, an alumnus of the University of San Diego, class of 92, and he has been teaching at USD since 1999. He actually took over some of my role when I became the honors director. So he got experience to teaching American politics as well. He is still a professor in the Department of Political Science and International Relations and the director of the Changemaker Hub. His research focuses on African politics with special interests in democratization, indigenous political structures, local governance, rule of law, the courts, and constitutionalism. He offers a study abroad immersion experience that many of you may have participated in South Africa every summer, where USD students collaborate with high school students in the village of Makaleki, South Africa. Although I don't think you went last year, did you, Mike? Mike will address the topic of diversity in politics this evening, both in the United States and abroad. Since 2000, Mike has been involved with a variety of programs that provide students with opportunities to learn about important political and social issues through experiential learning. Specifically, he's going to discuss the classes he's taught in Washington, D.C. through the Washington Center program, his study abroad classes in Makaleki, South Africa, and more recently, his teaching and research on homelessness. These classes and research opportunities provide all of the current students and you as well with the ability to immerse themselves into different communities and to consider the way in which politics and privilege intersect. So that is your formal introduction. And usually I would just slide straight over to Dr. Williams, but I'm going to share my screen and I hope they're all okay, Mike. But let me just do this. Can you see the slideshow?
Yep.
This is Dr. Dixon. Many of you know Dr. Dixon. That's me in the middle, and Dr. Williams in Washington, D.C. And I want to say that's 2012, Mike. Okay, there we go. That's Dr. Williams working in D.C. Dr. Dixon and I decided that he was not paying attention in his seminar, so we took a picture of him. There is where Nick, and this is serious, Nick Collins, I did introduce Dr. Norton to a Jameson's car bomb. Dr. Williams obviously had handled them before. There, Dr. Williams took a team to South Africa, and I don't know if you know Maria Silva from the Mulvaney Center, but she was with us in a group, and Mike can tell you what that tree is at a later point. There we are. You may have had Andy Allen in a class, but here we are in South Africa, and that's the end where we were in a car driving in South Africa, and we met this bird. Okay, I'm done. Mike, you're on.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that introduction, Dean Norton. Thanks all of you for coming. I have to admit, I was really honored to be invited to do this, and then I got really nervous, wasn't sure what I was going to say. But after seeing, like 30 minutes ago, I looked at the list of folks who were showing up, and I was like, I'm not nervous anymore. I have so many friendly faces out there. So it's just so good to see all of you. And those of you that I'm meeting for the first time, it's so good to meet you. The good news is I have about 20-25 minutes to give a spiel, and then you can ask me any question you like, or Dr. Norton, any question you like about politics and diversity. I kind of wanted to do this my own experience as a student at USD and then as a professor at USD, talk about some programs I've been involved with and how I see them over the years intersecting or not intersecting with diversity, inclusion, and equity. This is at the forefront of our minds and our hearts right now, as it should be. But I can say, is me as a student at USD and me as a professor 20 years ago, it wasn't always at the forefront, I like to admit. And I just reflecting on what has been important to me at USD as both a student and as a faculty member, I thought it was useful just for you to hear my reflections on this, and then the conversation can go wherever you like. So I'm going to share my screen and we will see how this goes. We'll do this first to start with, and then move everyone down. Can everyone see that? Everyone see that? Okay, good. So as it's already been mentioned, I was a graduate of USD in 1992. And while at USD, I made some really good decisions and I made some very questionable decisions. A real good decision I made was to be a poli-sci major and to have Dill Dixon as my advisor. And that's a picture of us at graduation. Another real good decision I made was to stop thinking I was going to be a jock my whole life and to actually go on a study abroad trip that ultimately landed me in Africa, which ended up being my field of interest and my passion for many, many years. And that one photo is my first trip to Africa when I think I was 20, 21. Thinking that I knew a lot about the world, thinking that I understood my own sort of privilege and my own sort of position in society. And as you can see from that photo, I probably didn't understand myself or understand the world as much as I thought. And it's been a journey as I've kind of grown up as a person and as a faculty member to sort of learn more about that. So at my time at USD, there's been 3 areas that I am passionate about. And the first is politics. And as all of you know who are poli-sci majors or who have thought about this, politics is, it's about power and how to exercise power. And when we think about social justice issues or diversity, inclusion, and equity issues, at some point in thinking about that, we have to think about the role of politics, the role of policy, the role of policymakers, and how we affect structural changes to actually address some of the inequalities and inequities that we're seeing. When I first started teaching politics, I didn't approach it from that light, to be honest, from that angle. That has changed very much the last 10 years or so. I've also been director of the Changemaker Hub for 7 years, and USD has been a Changemaker campus for 10 years. This is our 10-year anniversary. And changemaking to me has always been like the civic engagement part of the university, right? It's where you're not just learning about issues in the classroom, but you're going out on campus at USD or in your community at home, in the community at San Diego, and you're trying to make a positive social impact, and you need the skills and you need the resources to do that. And it's been just a joy to work at the Changemaker Hub, to work with students, faculty, staff, and community partners to make that happen the last 7 years. And then finally, as you think about which issues you want to lean into, I've been active the last couple of years on homelessness here in San Diego, which is something I'll talk to you more about in a minute. Something I knew very little about 3 or 4 years ago, and I'm still learning a lot. But it's one of these issues that is so interdisciplinary, and it requires like a liberal arts framework. It requires that you think about your values and you think about things other than politics when dealing with the issue. And to me, this is the core of USD, or of the core of my experience at USD, is the bringing together these 3 facets. And my journey through the 3 programs I want to tell you about briefly kind of highlight each of them. So as Dean Norton mentioned, I got to USD, I was super interested in experiential learning. There was this program, the Washington Center program, taking students to DC for a seminar, or they stayed for internships. And the very first year I went was January 2001. We took a lot of students to DC that year. I think it was 120 students for the inauguration. And as you may recall, the 2001 inauguration was after the 2000 election, which was at the time one of the most contentious in our history. And it was an amazing time to be in DC, and it was an amazing time to get students interested. It really lit my own fire about going back to DC and being involved in this program within the political science department. And it was an amazing program for that. But as I was reflecting on this for this presentation, I was thinking about that 2000 election. And I thought about it with a different framework, to be honest, than I did 20 years ago. That election came down to voting rights. That election came down to issues of equity in Florida. And here we are 20 years later, and some of those same issues are issues that we're discussing in our own community and other communities. And this is why it's just so important, I think, for our students and for our faculty and staff to continue to be involved in Washington, DC, because it's really in Washington, DC through these types of programs that students can really understand these types of issues in a way that they just can't get from the classroom at USD. No matter how great Dr. Norton and Dr. Dixon are in the classroom, it's different when you're in DC. And I think as we continue to send students to Washington, DC, I just know that issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity are now, it's going to be a much different framework for students when they start going back to DC again, hopefully starting next year after we get through the pandemic. So that's Dr. Dixon and I. That's just a photo from a few years ago in DC that I wanted to share because I think it's kind of a funny photo of us being silly. But it's also kind of a transition because I'd been involved in this program, been involved with my political science hat for many, many years. And then there was this opportunity to get involved in change making, right? And making a difference in the world. And for whatever reason, by chance or by luck, I learned about a community in South Africa called Makaleke. Those of you that are familiar with South African geography, it's about 6 hours north of Johannesburg. It's about an hour from the Zimbabwe border, a small rural community that I happened to have read about when I was in South Africa with students. I read about a program there and I went up to visit, and starting in 2012, every year since then, except for last year, we've taken anywhere from 10 to 20 students there. We also did a trip with Dr. Norton and Dr. Del Rio and Dr. Allen and Maria Silva and a whole bunch of other staff and faculty to just learn about this area of the world. And what's important about this is that this is where, for me as a faculty member, and I think for many of our students when they go to Makaleke, you come face to face with your privilege first and foremost as just being an American, right? And what it means about that you're able to afford a flight to travel halfway around the world to go visit this small village and to interact with these amazing young students there. And also to, to focus on what it means to be a white American or a non-white American. And then as you spend time in the village, we usually spend 2 to 3 weeks in the village, and we interact with a group of young people who call themselves equalizers. It's a club in Makuleke. They're fighting for their own educational rights. And as you travel between places in South Africa, if those of you have visited, Johannesburg is a much different place than Makuleke, and there are extreme differences between people's lived experiences, whether you're in rural South Africa, in an urban area, or in a township. And I know myself and many students often reflect upon not only our privilege as American, but how in our own society in America, there are these same gross inequalities based on race and class. And you're able to learn a lot traveling to other places, thinking about how other communities are dealing with those inequities and inequalities, and thinking about the politics around that. South Africa, one of the first things they did when they became a democracy in 1994 is they set up a commission called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where they talked about the harm that had been done both during apartheid and before apartheid to their community. And they put a lot of things out on the table, a lot of voices were heard, and it was a big moment for South African society. And again, reflecting on our own sort of politics and our own experiences here in the United States as it relates to politics, I think there's a lot that we can learn when we visit other places, especially South Africa, in terms of having these types of dialogues, in terms of learning the experiences of others, and just doing our best to sort of, change the structures that really do matter to people. So that's the Makuleke South Africa program that we've been doing for many, many years. And I'm happy to talk to you more about that during Q&A or anything else, or South African politics. So that's the change-making part. And then, they say all politics is local, right? And I would say that to my students, and I would tell my students, you got to get involved, you got to do this. And honestly, I wasn't much involved in local politics. I was much more interested in what was happening in DC or in South Africa. And that, started to feel funny. Like I'd go to South Africa 3 weeks out of a year and feel like I was doing all this great work. And then I'd come back to San Diego and I would just continue to teach my classes, or I'd take students to DC. So as the director of the hub about, 4 years ago, we started holding meetings on campus. President Harris started pulling in members of the community just to talk about homelessness in San Diego. And those of you that don't know, San Diego County has the 4th largest population of those experiencing homelessness in the country. And a group of us started to think, well, if we really want to make a difference in San Diego, we have to lean into homelessness. Like it's in our community, and we need to do something that a university can do. So a couple of years ago, myself and some colleagues, we applied for some funding to create something we call the Urgent Challenges Collective. And the idea of Urgent Challenges actually was Dr. Dean Norton, who brainstormed with me, like, what are we going to call this thing that we're going to try to ramp up on homelessness? And our strategic plan had referred to confronting humanity's urgent challenges. And so we thought, okay, Urgent Challenges Collective, let's have that as kind of like a sister organization to the hub. And in the past couple of years, we've set up these programs around research, teaching, and advocacy and engagement around the issue of homelessness. I taught probably the most meaningful course in my life last fall with Dr. Kate DeConnick in Theology and Religious Studies. It was on Zoom. We had 25 students taking a course on homelessness. It was an interdisciplinary course. But it also had 6 members of the community that attended every single course, every single class. These are folks who either were experiencing homelessness. We had one gentleman who was living in his car and he would Zoom in every day or every class from his phone. We have people who work in the nonprofit sector. We had a couple people working in the medical field, and they'd come to this class and they would just read the materials and have the dialogue with us. And it was probably the only positive thing that came out of this Zoom year, because they could Zoom into the class, right? So we had this amazing class where we're like learning about all this kind of great stuff around homelessness. And the community members in the class told us, we really need more research on some very specific issues. We need research on policing and homelessness, on evictions and homelessness. And because of that advice, we set up a research program this semester. We have 5 research teams with graduate, undergraduate students, faculty from across the university, working with community partners to create research projects that will collect information to give back to the nonprofits for their advocacy efforts in the county and in the city. And then this leads into more advocacy engagement, and we're hoping more teaching and more research the next year. So the collective has kind of set up this, we think, kind of this cycle that is all the best things about USD, right? It's our liberal arts, it's interdisciplinary, it's change making, it's working in community. And it's been a real fun to kind of work on that. And then here was kind of jumping ahead of myself, just in terms of some basic statistics in San Diego with respect to homelessness. And then that median price has gone up. Actually, I think it's now 700,000 here in San Diego, just over the last week. And I've been a part of a couple of research projects the last couple of years, looking at different aspects of homelessness. And what really comes to light in terms of circling now back, kind of coming full circle to the politics of this, is that I'm talking to those who have experienced homelessness and talking to elected officials at the local level. It's an issue of invisibility. Those experiencing homelessness feel like they're invisible, and elected officials, even those with the best intentions to address the issue, feel like they need to address it in a way where they can't put a shelter up in a place where there's going to be a lot of people walking by. They want to find a place in their city that's hidden. Or this second quote here about my intent was to activate the park. What activate meant was it was a park that was being used by those experiencing homelessness for camping and for sleeping and for living. And the person came in office, and the first thing this person did was to turn the park into a dog park. And that was done purposely to push those experiencing homelessness to another part of the city, and then to get the credit of creating a dog park for other constituents who wanted a place with their dogs. So that's just sort of some of the dynamics that I've learned about around this issue that kind of relate back to politics. And then definitely this last 2 years thinking about issues of homelessness. I know we find this in most every public policy area that we can talk about, but the impact of homelessness on Black residents and Black citizens is so disproportionate, right? This is the statistic for the United States. In San Diego County, about 4.5% of people in San Diego County identify as Black, and Black individuals make up 28 to 30% of our homeless population. So it's something that we are seeing. We see it in every community, but we see it right here in our own community. And myself and Dr. DeConnick and those working in the collective have tried to do some things this semester to not only spread awareness, but to create action around this issue. And I guess that's the most awkward. That's the most like, oh, it's over, I guess. I guess I'll just say that, I hope that was informative. I wanted to sort of share with you some programs we're doing here at USD, kind of my journey through those programs, and what USD as an institution is doing around some important issues around diversity and politics. And there's some information there about how you can learn more about these different things. And now we are open for questions. I hope I was on time. I hope everything's good. I'm going to stop sharing. That is it. Presentation done.
So if you we're a small enough group, if you want to just wave your hand, if you have a question, now's the time to ask. Peter Kiley.
Thanks. I'll start. Thanks, Noel. Thank you, Mike. It's great stuff, and it's fun to get a rehash of all the important and interesting things you've done. And it's envious, man, to be a USD professor and to have the opportunity to bring students on all those different adventures is great. And it got, of course, we have a son there, but it got me thinking with COVID and with everything, what's the university doing to get more students involved in particularly the homeless program and all? How many are currently engaged, and is there efforts to recruit more into that? And how do they know about the class and all that, all the opportunities that you're doing, what's happening, the research?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question, Peter, and it's great to see you. Yeah, so what are we doing? So this research program that I just talked about, we launched during COVID, we launched the application process for this in November. And we had 109 students apply for 12 positions. And we had 11 faculty. So we only had the funding for the 5 teams, like, you know, so there is like a lot of demand for the research. The class, we would love to be offering more classes on homelessness. We hired someone in sociology this year whose expertise is on homelessness. And she's going to be offering a class. Dr. DeConnick and I hope to offer it again next spring. We had the Changemaker Hub. We do this thing every year called the Challenge, which is like an idea competition. And this year, the challenge idea was around homelessness. And we had about 200 students, mostly first years, participate in that. So it was about 1/5 of the first year class who participated. And then the way they learn about it is through our website. We have a lot of faculty who do a lot of announcements in their classes. We have a speakers series where we bring someone on Zoom once a month. We have a YouTube channel with all of the previous speakers. So we try to get out the message as much as possible, Peter. Like one of the things about USD, like with any organization, is sometimes communication is a challenge, like to make sure everyone knows what's going on. But I'm happy to share with you all those links and everything going on. And
are there opportunities for alumni in the area or alumni groups to somehow contribute, participate in any of this?
Yeah, there sure is. So, so what we like to tell alumni is if you have expertise, if you're interested in this field, and if you want to be part of a speaker series or come talk to us about stuff, please do that. One of our research projects, we created what's called a toolkit around stigmatization and homelessness. And so it's like we're doing it with student groups, but we've done it now at churches. And we actually just did it on an alumni call last week with through the Alumni Network. This toolkit is open access on our website where we share stories about individuals who have experienced homelessness, and we have questions to start a dialogue. Because I think many of us have certain ideas about who's experiencing homelessness. And unfortunately, most of the time, what we have in our head is not right. Most people will tell me that most people in San Diego come to San Diego to be homeless because it's nice weather here. But we know that 80% of the people who are homeless in San Diego are from San Diego. Like it's not, like homeless individuals just don't pack up and move around because it's a poverty issue, right? So we have the toolkit I'm happy to share. And if you want to get involved with the toolkit, you can. And then if you want to support programs, you're welcome. Like there's all those opportunities as well. So we're open to anything.
I see Melissa has her hand up with a question.
Hi, I'm curious if you can elaborate more on maybe the early days in your interfacing with the city officials. I live in the Bay Area, but my experience with city officials is oftentimes there's a lot of resistance just because they're like, how are we going to pay for it? Who's going to do it? Who's going to coordinate it? We don't have the money. I'm wondering if you had any of those experiences, or if because the university had funding and staffing, they were just open. I'm just wondering if you can elaborate on that at all. And awesome, by the way. Thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Melissa. You know, it was like, yes, there is always the problem of funding. What's been really ideal here in San Diego is that 2 years ago, the city passed a 10-year plan to address homelessness. So they had this big consulting group come out. They have a 10-year plan that they just launched right before COVID. And so the city has already said what it needs to do with policy. That they don't have the funding to do it yet. There was a bond measure that didn't pass this year to help fund part of it. So we haven't run into that resistance at the city of San Diego, especially now with Mayor Todd Gloria, who's an alum as well from the Poli-Sci department. He has definitely put homelessness at the top of his agenda. I can say though that my discussions with elected officials from other cities, they don't have 10-year plans and they're much more resistant to doing things. And unfortunately, homelessness is such a regional issue. If I live in the city of La Mesa, and if La Mesa is not doing something with its to address its homelessness population, it's not going to matter what San Diego is doing because we're 20 miles away. So I run into resistance there. The city itself seems really excited to do things. They're just looking for the funding. I hope that answers your question.
Do we have any more questions out there? Oh, I see Megan.
Yeah, so one of the challenges we're seeing in San Jose is the resistance of communities. Everybody wants homelessness to be solved. But then when they try to bring solutions to communities where people don't feel comfortable with having, small house, tiny house settlements or, communities within their suburban neighborhood, how are you helping to educate citizens? I think it's a huge part of getting them to understand they're part of the solution.
Yeah, no, thank you, Megan. That's great. So a lot of this is just like getting awareness out and how you frame the issue and what information you can bring to bear. So Nimbyism is a huge issue, obviously. And I was part of a research team with San Diego State this last year that investigated Nimbyism. We did surveys and did data analysis around 3 communities that built affordable housing. And we looked to see, okay, did property values go down? Because you often hear communities say, oh, we don't want to have affordable housing because property values are going to go down. No, property values didn't go down in any of those places. Crime rates are going to go up. No, crime rates didn't go up. And then we talked to individuals from the community, and a lot of them either didn't know there was affordable housing in their community just because it's just they didn't know. And when we asked them about whether they would be open to additional affordable housing, what we found is that people generally are not automatically NIMBY or YIMBY. They're somewhere like in the middle, and they just want to know, like, they have this, a lot of individuals have this idea of affordable housing as being public housing from the 1970s. Like, something like high rise, it's not going to be aesthetically pleasing. It's not going to add to the value of the community. And when you talk to those folks and they say, look, I'd be happy to have affordable or low income housing as long as it fits in the community, as long as, can you build a park? Or can you make sure there's going to be parking? Parking's a huge issue, right? And so we have been in dialogue with developers, letting them know of our findings, so that what usually happens in this process is that the city says they want to maybe build a low income or affordable housing unit, and then they have to go out to the community and start lobbying. We're trying to provide information to the cities, county, and or developers, so that when they go out and they dialogue with community, they have information ready to combat these automatic negative perceptions. That's one way we're trying to do it. And if anyone else has other ways that we can be doing it, and you want to reach me after this call, that would be wonderful. I'd love to hear what's going on in San Jose or other places.
We have time for one more question, then I'm going to give you a set of brief updates. Alyssa. Alyssa, you're on mute.
Okay, hi. I know you said that poverty was a big issue in homelessness, but what are the other driving factors in homelessness? Are any of them unique to San Diego?
That's a good question. The research really shows that the biggest issue in terms of why an individual becomes homeless is because they can't afford their house or their rent. So it's an affordability issue. And yes, San Diego, that is probably, it's a more dramatic issue than other communities just because the cost of housing is so high here compared to other places. The other issues that come up are sometimes like substance abuse and mental illness are definitely factors. Sometimes it's hard to know whether those factors are the cause or consequence of becoming homeless, if that makes sense. Like whether someone starts to abuse substances, whether that gets them on the street or whether they start to do that once they're on the street and they're trying to cope. In both cases, it's about 30% of the population in San Diego where that's an issue. And then it's healthcare. I've talked to many people who literally they had a job, they're a single parent, their child gets a terrible disease, they have to quit their job to take care of the child, and then they can't pay for things, and all of a sudden they've lost their housing. So the lack of medical care is also a big one.
Oh, wow.
Yes, homeless individuals can register to vote. You can use, there are multiple ways you can use different addresses to get them registered to vote. And there was a pretty big effort to do that this last year in San Diego.
One additional question. I've worked in direct services with the unsheltered population in San Diego. And if you're aware of, the federal programs that fund a lot of the services around the unsheltered population, they tend to be centered into particular models, the rapid rehousing model or the permanent supportive housing model. And those are supposed to be attributed to the traits and needs of the individual. Have you done any research on the efficacy of those models and whether or not those models are more or less effective in the San Diego region versus the efficacy that they claim to have in other regions of the nation?
Yeah, that's such a great question, Samantha. Thank you for that. So let me just make sure. So you're talking about the housing, what's maybe called the housing first model. So I know we're late, but let me just quickly explain. Housing first is this idea that if you're unsheltered, that the first thing you need is housing, that we need to get you into shelter, and then we'll deal with if you have a substance abuse issue or a health issue or a medical issue. This is a change of policy. 20 years ago, it was to get housing, you would have to go through like rehabilitation programs first, right? So housing first is the model. And Samantha, you're right. There's a lot of good research out there that that is the best model in terms of people getting housing and keeping their housing. To your question about whether it is the best for San Diego, I haven't done research on that, and I haven't seen any studies that looked at our own area. I think there's an assumption that it does, and I know that's the policy of the city of San Diego and right now the San Diego County. But I think you're right, like we need evidence-based sort of, we need evidence-based information to see if that's actually best for San Diego. Most think it is, but I see your question and your point.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. And I'm sure if you have questions for him, you can email us, email Megan, not Megan Polamus, Megan O'Rourke, and ask them. And I know Megan's going to tell you what she's going to do to stay in touch. But I just want to give you just a couple of updates about what we're doing in the college. And these are going to be specifically focused on what we're doing with this alumni roadshow focused on diversity. So in the College of Arts and Sciences, we have a deep commitment to the liberal arts, as Dr. Williams noted, and it requires us to work toward eliminating racial inequity as part of that, as we understand the full human experience better and better. So I want to take this opportunity to let you know what we're doing for diversity and inclusion efforts. So over the past 2 semesters, the college initiated an interdisciplinary course around Black Lives Matter, which provided in-depth insight into history and culture of Black people in the United States. That's run through the Humanities Center, but taught by 20 faculty from across campus. The college also launched a new project to create the first diversity, equity, and Inclusion Transformational Award, which will recognize a staff member or faculty member each year who's demonstrated remarkable achievements in promoting anti-racism on campus. And we award our first one this year. Beginning next fall, the college launches a brand new Africana Studies minor. Where we're going to describe and debate many of the contributions of Black people around the globe. So that there was the quick update. So I want to thank you all for attending. And I hope this event provided some insight in the social justice efforts that Mike Williams is working on in political science and international relations, and for the Changemaker Hub and the Urgent Challenges Collective, and to work on these diversity issues. And do tune in to, we have several other diversity alumni events, one in the Northwest, and I think Megan can tell you more about that, but each of we're going to do film in LA, and we're going to do environmentalism in the Seattle area, but you can all show up because it doesn't matter where you are now with Zoom. So nice to see all of you again, and I'll turn it over to Megan.
Thanks so much, Noelle. And thank you again, Dr. Williams, for leading us through that conversation. It was super lively. It was really exciting to have this space and time to address those important matters. Also, as they mentioned, we will include contact information for all of you to be able to connect offline. And a couple of ways to do that will be through the thank you email that I'll send out at the end of today's event. It will include the recording of today's session as well, if there's anything that you wanted to review at a later time. It will also include the many different ways to learn more about the different topics that Dr. Williams chatted about today, including the South Africa Study Abroad course, the Homelessness projects, and the Changemaker Hub. We will also include links for you to connect via Facebook and LinkedIn. So if you would like to start adding each other through that avenue, you're more than welcome to do so as well. That can be individual, or it can also be joining the groups that we have for the Washington, D.C. area as well. If you would like to learn more about the Alumni Association, the Washington, D.C. Tarot Club, or what other programs are already get involved with the Alumni Association, don't hesitate to email me. I can certainly set up a call or send you some more information via email if you'd like. Thanks again for everyone who logged in today. We hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you at another USD alumni event soon. Have a great night, everyone. Take care.